We're going to get started. So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I'm Dina Massikwa, and I'm president of the Massachusetts branch of the International Dyslexia Association. And we are so glad to have you with us this evening. Before I introduce our speakers, I just wanted to let you know about some other upcoming webinars that we have this spring. In early May, we are going to have one on dyslexia. And we will be going over what is dyslexia, what does good intervention look like, and what can parents do to support their children with dyslexia. And then later, in late May and early June, we will have another webinar on neuropsychological evaluations that parents get outside often parents get neuropsychological evaluations outside of schools and how to interpret these. And also, along with that, the webinar will also include school evaluations. How do you interpret a school evaluation? Feel free to spread the word to friends whom you think might be interested in these webinars. So I'm super excited about tonight's webinar, which is about all you need to know about the IEP meeting and the IEP process. And I'm honored to present our speakers. First, we have Robin Fabiano, and she is Department Head of Student Services at Westwood High School. And along with her is Joe Green, who is a special education attorney at Coton, Crabtree, and Strong. So I'm going to pass the torch to Robin, who will be sharing with you and Joe this fabulous webinar.
Great, thank you. Hi, folks. I am going to share my screen so you can follow along.
One sec, Robin. I want to make you right now. People see me, and I want to just make you in their vision.
Okay.
Give me one sec. Sorry about that. Okay. I think that will. There we go. Okay. Now they see you, not me.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think we were going to say, if you have questions, you can email them to this address, and that we're not going to be having questions throughout the presentation, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because of time. Yeah.
Okay. So what is an IEP? So some people think an IEP stands for an individual education plan because it's a it's a big document that outlines services and special education services for your child, but it's really an IEP, an individual education program, and it encompasses a roadmap for what services your child will get from the school. It outlines the profile of your child and also a placement, so where your child will be having these services. And the IEP is a document that is mandated by law. It gives information for the teacher and for the parent about how the child is doing in school, what services the child will get, and where those services will take place, in which location. And today we're going to talk about each component of the IEP. And when your child becomes eligible for special education, that is the document that outlines the services in the plan for intervention. So IEP meetings can be scary. And I'm just gonna, sorry you guys, I'm just gonna switch where I'm seeing people because it's covering for me the page. There we go. All right. So IEP meetings can be scary and overwhelming. Sometimes there can be, 10 people in a meeting, and sometimes there can be a lot of professionals who you haven't met before. But at the IEP meeting, it's a time to build positive relationships with your child's school. These are the people that are going to be intervening with your child and working with you to make sure that you know how to support your child at home also. So it's important to ask questions and get to know the members of your team. There are different types of IEP meetings that you're going to encounter throughout your child's school history. And generally, they have different tones throughout the years. So the initial meeting, the first meeting, and we'll talk about that, can be pretty scary. And then these annual meetings that happen once a year, they tend to be a little bit more relaxed because you already know the players and are more familiar with the school. And so they tend to be a little bit less formal. The IEP meeting is the school's opportunity to propose the plan to address your child's learning needs. And an IEP lasts for 1 year. And so you might be thinking, 3 to 4 years down the road, but the IEP is just a 1-year document and it gets updated and changed every year. And when I say it's your school's opportunity to propose a plan, we'll talk a little bit later about what to do when you disagree with that plan. And you can always revisit and ask questions and get clarification and make changes to the document. It's the parent's right to do that. And then your vision and your child's vision as they get older should drive the proposal. So that's where the I for individual comes into play. So your vision for your child is different than perhaps my vision for my child. And everything gets tailored to what you hope for your child's future. So if your plan is for your child to go to college, you'll have a very academically oriented IEP. If your plan and your child's plan, is to not go to college and do something else, the plan might look a little different. So we should always be, putting forth something that's individualized. Okay, so let's talk about how someone becomes eligible for an IEP. So the most common way that happens is when a parent or a school requests testing or an evaluation to determine the presence of a disability. So perhaps you're at home and you've been concerned about your child's development and you're noticing maybe gaps in early literacy or difficulty acquiring numeracy, you might then reach out to your school and request a special education evaluation. That needs to happen in writing. And most often it happens, you send the letter to your principal. Sometimes the school identifies a child's having difficulty before the parent. And they have some mechanisms in school to offer general education supports first. So they might be in a small group literacy class. They might be getting pulled out for extra support. And maybe that's not working. And so the school might call you and say, we would like to test your child to determine whether or not there's a presence of a disability. And then in either case, consent gets sent home to you and it outlines which tests the school is going to conduct, which evaluations, and you have to sign consent and send it back to the school. They cannot test your child without you giving consent. And then when that happens, there's a 30-day process, a 30 school day timeline for schools to conduct the evaluations. And then 15 days after that, the school has to hold a meeting to determine whether or not your child is found eligible for special education. So that entire process from consent to the meeting is 45 school days. And that can be a long time. So if, for example, someone signs consent in February, 45 days later is May. And so that is a long time. So I would say that if you're having concerns about your child, you reach out to the school sooner rather than later. So you get the process started, or at least some pre-referral interventions. I want to quickly click on the flow chart. This is the flow chart that's used to determine whether or not a child is eligible for special education. And you'll see here that there are 8 disability categories that Massachusetts considers. And you have to hit 3 boxes. So questions 1, 2, and then it's really 2A, 2B, 2C, to see whether or not you're eligible for special education. And the first box are these disability categories. And you'll notice here this box, specific learning. That's the specific learning disability category. And so you may be surprised not to see things like dyslexia on here or dyscalculia on here, because schools are not medical facilities, and they're really talking about broad buckets of educational disability categories. And that's what they use to determine the presence of a disability. So don't be surprised if someone doesn't use the word dyslexia and just says specific learning disability in reading. You always have the right to review the testing 2 days before the meeting. You may need to request them yourself, but that's the law, that you should have the reports ahead of time. And you should definitely do that, because you want to be able to read the reports ahead of time and make sure that you note down any questions that you have or concerns, so you're prepared for the meeting. If there are teachers in the group, it's important to speak succinctly about the students' strengths and weaknesses. And I would say that it's important to remember that this is an emotional time for parents. And so really the purpose of the IEP meeting is to make sure that there's a plan in place. And so we really at this point don't want to, hammer too much, bad information. We just want to make sure that we're focusing on the interventions. And then for parents, districts repeat the evaluation process every 3 years. And we do that to redetermine eligibility. There's a lot of history in special education where students were kept in special education programs long after they continued to require those services. And so the law is in place to protect students and make sure that if they don't need to be in special education, they're not. If you feel like your child might be able to terminate special education services earlier than the 3-year testing mark, you can request an earlier evaluation. You can also do that if there's a new disability concern. You can ask for an earlier evaluation. So there's flexibility in that every 3-year testing deadline. And if a district wants to terminate a service, if, for example, let's say your child was getting speech services, the district can't all of a sudden come to a meeting and say, you know what, we don't think your child needs speech anymore. They need to do some sort of assessment that then shows data that the child doesn't need that service anymore. And it's your right to speak up and ask the district for that data if they try to discontinue a service without it. And then finally, in terms of eligibility, special education ends once a student either receives their diploma, so takes their diploma, or turns 22, or has met their transitional goals. So we have some students who have earned their diploma, they've met all the graduation requirements, but the team determines that they need to remain in special education to work on their transition goals, but they might terminate at age, for example, 20, and they don't wait until they're 22. And so there are 3 ways that you actually end special education. And for another webinar down the road, we can talk about what happens to students in college and how students with dyslexia get their needs met in college. Joe, do you want to talk about some of the case law around eligibility?
Yeah, I just want to say that Robin is presenting a good picture. Obviously, I deal with fighting the school districts mostly. That's what we do, and especially with dyslexia, which is the subject here. That is often very difficult because dyslexics have often a very high intelligence, and they're not doesn't show directly that they can't learn, and so. Fortunately, there's case law, fairly recent. Forest Grove is the name of the case, which says that if the school district finds a student not eligible for an IEP at all, because they're making, quote, effective progress, the parent has to, the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court, this all went all the way up, said The parents have a right to make a unilateral placement if they can and ask for reimbursement. Before that, it was not clear at all whether, when there was no IEP and the student was not found eligible for an IEP, whether the school district would have to pay for a unilateral placement. Now, the case law also makes it clear that if you make a unilateral placement for a dyslexic, it's at the parent's own risk. And you have to then sue the school district to get eligibility, even to get eligibility, because that's the number one scenario. If the school district says there is no IEP here, we don't find the student eligible at all for any IEP. That creates, and it's a very difficult situation for a parent who can't afford to make a unilateral placement. Then you have to go against the school district, and you have to prove that the school district is wrong. And this is especially hard for dyslexia because often these are very bright kids, unlike kids who have, birth defects or autism spectrum and everything like that. So there's two parts to that. First, if the school district says you're not entitled to an IEP at all, that has to be proven and by the parents. And then the question is, can you make a unilateral placement to a private school and then ask for reimbursement from the school district, which is the parent's burden? Or if you can't, you have to challenge the school district's finding of no eligibility. The other situation is the one that Robin is more addressing, is if the school district writes an IEP that the parent finds is totally inappropriate and does not address the student's needs accurately, and the parents feel the student is still not making effective progress and needs more services, again, it's the parents who have to bring the case against the school district to say this IEP is not appropriate, and therefore we're challenging the school district to add these additional services. Both of those situations require expert witnesses, which is expensive and difficult, and especially with dyslexics who are often very intelligent and look like they're making effective progress. We have many difficult cases with school districts with dyslexics, as opposed to where it's obvious that an IEP is needed. So there's two situations. One, an IEP, and this is fairly recent. If the school district finds that there's no IEP needed, it's fairly recent, well, in the past 10 years, that the United States Supreme Court has said that is a situation that the parents can fight and find the student and say that the student is eligible for an IEP. Before that, they couldn't even do anything like that, and it was a close case. So that's Forest Grove. I guess I'd just start with that, and I'm sure that raises a lot of questions. But
awesome, thank you. Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself and I kept moving the screen to the next page, so I apologize if that was distracting.
Did you want to respond to some of that, Robin? I don't know.
Well, I'm going to respond to it when we get to the parent response part. Yeah. And I guess the only other thing I would say is that, hopefully school districts that you're working with are creative. And even if the child maybe isn't found eligible for an IEP, there are other things that can be put in place. There's a lot of technology. There's a lot of small group instruction through general education that, can help kids with dyslexia and reading and writing disabilities. But the next section is to talk a little bit about what to expect for an annual IEP meeting. So for example, we just finished talking about an initial IEP meeting where your child is found eligible. And then the next year, you have what's called an annual IEP meeting. And that is a little different because at this meeting, hopefully it's just you and like the direct service providers that are working with your child. So hopefully it will feel a little bit more relaxed. But in general, the flow of the meeting goes something like this. You review the parent concerns, and I think I told you that the IEP should be driven by the parent concerns. So if you have specific things that you want to address, you should bring them up at this time. Sometimes it's helpful to send your parent concerns ahead of time to your team liaison so they're aware and can start thinking before the meeting of some ways to address your concerns so they can already come to the table prepared to talk about the things that you want to bring up. Then there's the team vision. So that's where you and your school team align on a vision for your child. And that vision is not a year vision, it's a 3 to 5 year vision. And so we're looking a little bit ahead when we talk about the team vision. Then you should expect an update from your teachers, the general education teachers and service providers. There must be a general education teacher at your team meeting. And if there isn't, you can cancel it because there has to be someone who is informed on the current standards of that grade in your meeting. So you can always talk about how the student is working towards hitting the standards of that grade, okay? And then the service provider should also be giving an update at that time. You should then review the accommodations, including any accommodations for standardized assessments. So in grades 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10, students take the MCAS exams. And so there are specific accommodations that are really helpful for students who have reading challenges. There are some non-standard accommodations that students are eligible for if they're non-readers, but they have strong comprehension. So make sure that you talk about that. Then there's going to be a proposal of goals and objectives. We'll talk about the services, so how we're going to meet the needs. And then there's a whole host of miscellaneous discussions depending on the extent of your child's disability. So they may need transportation because maybe they're in a language-based classroom and that classroom is housed at a school outside of their home school. And so they need a van to get there. Sometimes they're extended school year services. So if the child has a potential to have substantial regression when over long breaks of school. And so school districts provide extended school year to provide some more education during the summer. There's a page called additional information. And I think, Joe, you can give me a thumbs up, but that's like the lawyer's least favorite page. It's like a dumping ground of everything that doesn't fit on the IEP, but should be on there. So there's like lots of different things that go on the additional information page that can somewhat get a little murky,
yes.
Right? If your child is on the autism spectrum and also has dyslexia, there are autism spectrum considerations that are discussed. There's a bullying statement if your child's at risk of being bullied because of their disability or is at risk of being a bullier. That's discussed as well. And then finally, placement. And so after you make the plan, the team determines whether or not the school district can implement that plan in their current school district. And if they can, great. They might also look at as I said, maybe a language-based classroom that's in the school district, but maybe not in your home school. Or if not, then they would determine whether or not your child needs to be placed at a variety of a range of out-of-district programs. And you might be wondering, how long does this take? And in general, IEP meetings last for about an hour. And you know, people at the school are very skilled in going through, you know, this quickly. And I would just remind parents that, again, this is the school's proposal. So at this point, you may be thinking, I'm not sure this is going to work. And there is some discussion that should happen at during this meeting. But sometimes the school district might just say, you know, this is our belief. We're going to propose it, right? This is our proposal. We think this is best. And then later, we'll talk on a couple more slides about what to do with how to respond. But again, this is the time where the school district is laying out their plan.
And my practice is mostly when the parents disagree.
Okay. Some districts, continuing on the annual IEP, some districts send home a planning document. And if they do that, you know, they might ask questions like, what's your vision? What are your hopes? Like, what is your child like? Any new activities? Because there's a place in the IEP to document like your child's strengths. Make sure you do that, because we want your voice to be part of the IEP document, and we want to make it as personalized and as individualized as possible. So if the district is sending home a questionnaire for you, please do it and send it back. And the district also has to send back out the IEP proposal within a certain time frame. And it gets kind of tricky when we have to send something out and the parent's voice isn't in there because you haven't sent back your parent concerns yet. And then, you know, we have to like revise the document like 3 weeks later when you send it back. So just try to be timely with any of those planning documents.
Robin, what's your experience with parents who, when the school district says no IEP is needed and the parents disagree?
I think that my experience is that if it's like a gray area, right? If the child's like right on the cusp of qualifying and then not qualifying, I think it's the district's responsibility, if there are still some outlier areas of vulnerability, to be able to address those with a plan. So either small group literacy through general education. As I said, you know, a lot of districts are using technology, for example, Google Read Write, which is like a Google embedded Kurzweil. If that helps anyone put it into context, that has things like word prediction and vocabulary builders and, you know, the ability to dictate into text, and it's like embedded into the Google platform, which really aligns with all the Chromebooks that are being given out like candy these days. So I think that if the district, you know, identifies vulnerability, then they should be proposing ways to address that. And hopefully that's a way to bridge any disconnect between the parents and the district. There's always an opportunity to do more testing. So if there's an area that the parents and the schools disagree on, you know, the parents can ask, you know, could you do some more testing in this area? And that's called an extended evaluation. And that might be the school district also requesting that to say, you know, we didn't get the information we needed. Let's do a little bit more digging.
So you don't like it as much if the parents do a unilateral placement and just sue the school district?
I mean, I don't feel like there should be that much conflict, unfortunately. That's, you know, I feel like.
You're trying to take me out of a job?
I think it's just really important to try to solve things on a local level as much as possible. Yeah, of course, there are certain times that it's just, you know, it's really hard to come to an agreement, and, you know, that's why you guys are in business, for sure. Yep. The document itself, it actually has 11 pages, but each page could be multiple pages. So you could really get an IEP document. I mean, I've seen some as hefty as like 30 pages. Yeah. And so it is overwhelming to look at. And so I want to make sure that you guys know as parents that, you know, if you don't understand something, that you should go back to your school and have them walk through it with you and answer any questions. You probably may have a CPAC or the Special Ed Parent Council in your community, and you can use them as a resource too. But you have to sign consent to implement the IEP. And probably, you know, this is advice that you've been getting for years. You shouldn't sign anything you don't understand. So you do your best to understand the document. So page 1, it's an administrative data page. It's really just the cover sheet has your child's name, your name, email addresses, things like that. The next 3 sections are where you will find the parent concerns, key evaluation summaries, a description of your student strengths, and then, as I said, any parent concerns. And this is a really important narrative section where teachers should be able to flip to that page and have a non-jargon opportunity to read about your child's strengths and weaknesses. Like, that's where you outline the child's disability, current testing, and it should be easy to read. And if you open it up and it's like all crazy test scores and you don't understand it, you can ask for it to be rewritten, because you want the IEP to be user-friendly. It's supposed to be the roadmap for teachers to be able to implement these things. And if they don't understand it, it's not going to work. PLEP A, so PLEP is like a jargon word, which I just said we shouldn't be using jargon, and I just used it, so I apologize. But PLEP stands for present level of performance, and there are two sections, A and B. The A section addresses the general education curriculum, so how the disability impacts reading, writing, math, social studies, history, all of those areas. And then PLEP B addresses all of these other considerations, so things like social emotional, communication, deaf and hard of hearing, assistive technology. There's like 15 different check marks. And the accommodations and the services are split on each section. So you could have some accommodations that the child might need to access content, and then some accommodations that your child might need to access like because of their communication challenges. Then the next section are goals. And you can have multiple goal areas. So you could have a goal for reading, you could have a goal for writing, you could have a goal for speech, you can have a goal for social, you can have a goal for academic support and organization and executive functioning. So your child may have one goal, your child might have 5 goals. And that can also be a little stylistically, that can change throughout the years. So in elementary, they tend to do like a reading, writing, math. And as we get up to the high school, it kind of all falls into the area of academics. And so again, that can shift. Then the next page is the service delivery. That's where you'll see a grid, and it is broken up into 3 different service areas. Any consultation that happens, so consultation is adult to adult interactions. So the team might get together and talk about your kid, so many times per month. The next section is B, the B grid, and that's for any in-class support. So your child might have a teaching assistant go into the class during reading time to help support your teacher and increase the teacher to student ratio during a needy time. And then the C grid is pull-out services. So any direct special education services that happen outside of the classroom. Then the next page has, again, 3 different areas. There's a blurb on there that is written to justify why your child needs to be removed from the general education setting. So if they're getting small group reading, then that's listed on there. Then it also talks about schedule modification if your child needs extended school year, and then any transportation needs. The next page is state and district testing, where all of the accommodations can be found. The next page is the additional information, as I said before. As your child gets older, at age 14, we start including something in IEP called transition. There's a transition document, and I'm talking a little bit more about that later, and again, that's a whole other webinar, but that's a new document, that's a new page that's only relevant for students 14 and up. And then finally, the signature page. So again, that's a lot of paperwork. So as I said before, at age 14, the child should start participating in their IEP meeting. And that can look different for everyone. That might mean that the child comes in person and just, says hello to the team and gets used to sitting at the table and sharing, their vision. Usually 14 is around that time where students are transitioning from 8th to 9th grade. And so oftentimes the child says something about, how they feel about transitioning to high school at this time, like any classes they might want to take, anything they're worried about, something they want to look forward to. Some other students are really well-versed in their learning style, and they might be able to contribute to this is something that really helps me, or I'm really looking forward to, this type of support or this accommodation going forward. By the time a child is 16, the child should, be fully participating in IEP meetings and be contributing to their vision, because at this stage, usually students are like sophomores and they're starting to think about whether or not after high school they're going to go to college, or if they're going to go to trade school, or if they're going to go right into the workforce or the military. And at that point, the IEP should start targeting specifically skills to help that child meet that specific goal. And at 18, if the child needs it, the district should make a referral to an adult service agency. So typically for kids under the specific learning disability category, that is usually MRC, which is mass rehab. And students could, that's like an adult service agency that can help students 18 to 22 and older, after 22, with services in the community. And then the transition piece of paper, it's called a TFP. And that acts as a roadmap for the team in terms of transition services. How do we get the child from, where they are now to gain skills to where they want to go? And it's part of the IEP meeting. It's discussed in a variety of different locations. Like, information is taken from the vision, it's taken from services, it's taken from when you talk about the child's schedule. And it's a document that's attached to the IEP, but it's not like a legal document in the sense that everyone's bound to making sure that what's on the transition document actually gets implemented. So for example, we might say on a transition plan for a child with dyslexia that, they are going to, Joe, help me out here. An activity could be that they're going to, write a resume during their learning center. Yeah. And if for some reason they write a resume but don't actually send it out somewhere, the school district isn't held responsible for that. It's like a roadmap of activities on there, and it includes things like what the parent could do also. So for example, if the child wants to get their driver's license, that could go on there. It might, a bullet point might be, Johnny and his parents will explore driver's ed opportunities. But it's really up to the family whether or not that happens. So it's a roadmap. It's not a required goal or objective. So it's different than the goals and objectives in the IEP. Anything you want to add on that, Joe?
No, I think it describes the IEP.
Okay.
When there's no dispute as to whether or not the person's eligible at all.
Okay. In terms of progress monitoring, districts are obligated to report on IEP progress at the same rate that the general education students get progress reports. So that might look like you receiving a general education report card and a special education progress note. And that is progress on the specific objectives listed on the IEP. So if you have a goal area in reading, and the goal area says, Sally will, read at this rate, at this grade level, et cetera. And there are objectives underneath that might say, in quarter 1, Sally will read at 60 words per minute. At quarter 2, she will read at 70 words per minute. At quarter 3, 80 words, to reach the goal that's maybe 100 words per minute. Your objectives per quarter should actually say what Sally is reading at that time. So they should be specific. They should include data. They should include dates. So on November 2nd, Sally was able to read this grade level book at this words per minute. And you should be able to then be able to go back and track whether or not that child's making progress towards that specific objective.
Let me ask you this, Robin. How often in reaching these goals do you deal with the parents' experts?
In terms of reaching the goals?
No, in terms of setting the goals.
Oh, so the goals are discussed and determined at the annual IEP meeting. And so the goals are usually determined by the evaluations. So in initial IEP, you find areas of weakness. So for example, in the example I just gave, if fluency is an area of weakness, then that would become a goal, and then there would be objectives. If there's an advocate, for example, who attends the meeting, so parents are, you'll see that in, I think, a future slide. Parents are allowed to bring advocates or anyone who has knowledge of the child to the team. And I actually encourage parents, especially at initials and for parents of younger students, to bring someone to the meeting, because they can be overwhelming. And sometimes you miss information. But if an advocate says, oh, I really think they should do read at this many words per minute, right? And that person is a reading specialist and has a background in reading and, you know, can contribute good information about why that's important, then the team should listen to that. So progress can be also collected in a variety of ways as determined by the IEP team. So sometimes it's a standardized assessment. Sometimes it's in a formal assessment. Sometimes it's just like a spelling test, right? So like on the weekly spelling test, the kid is going to get, you know, a 80 or above, right? So it can be a variety of ways, and all of these ways are valid, right? You just have to agree upon the right way you're going to monitor that progress. And then if your child receives extended school year services, they will get a progress report for that period as well.
Dina, and what do you have any things that parents bring to you for the MABIDA situation for dyslexics that need to be, you want to ask any questions?
One question that I know a lot of parents ask me is, when a school says, so let's say a child is reading, a child's in 4th grade, and, you know, a lot of schools use the BAS benchmark assessment system, or they use the DRA, and they say that, let's say a child's in 4th grade and the child is reading at a 2nd grade level, and the school will say, okay, within a year, so let's say it's the end of 4th grade, by the end of 5th grade, this child will be reading at a 3rd grade level. We'll make 1 year's progress within a year. A lot of parents ask me, well, then the gap's not getting closed. Mm-hmm. Is it appropriate for me to say, I would like my child to make 1.5 years worth of progress within a year? Like what is kind of, you know, that's what I want? Is that realistic? You know, I don't know if you have any, ideas.
I have some thoughts on that.
Okay.
Well, the benchmark assessment, it's funny. So between K and 2, there's probably 20 different levels that a child can move through. Like the benchmarks are quick, right? You can go in 1 year from like an A to a G, let's just say. In 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, there are like 2 benchmarks. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to go from an M to an O, because there's just so many more skills that are involved in reading for meaning at an upper grade than like skill development and phonics decoding at a younger grade, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it does get tricky as kids get older to make like benchmark growth at a quick pace. Oh. So I would say that, you know, individual growth is important, right? And so if the district says that they can do 1 year's growth and the child is still behind 1 year, that, you know, they're determining that because of the child's rate of progress and the amount of intervention they need, et cetera. It doesn't mean that if they make 1 year progress, they're going to stop, right? They're going to keep going. And, you know, that's what you want. And you wouldn't want less than 1 year. So you want the IEP objectives to be like lofty, but attainable. Mm-hmm. And I would just say that as you get older, there are so many different components that go into reading that it's just really, it can be really tricky to make, you know, big leaps and bounds. Right. And so I would say that, you know, sometimes that answer can be disappointing for parents. There's lots of opportunity to continue to teach reading all throughout high school. Mm-hmm. And the goal is not always to be, you know, you may not always be exactly on pace with what you want. You just need to be moving ahead.
Right.
And the parents expert might be saying the child is not making enough progress, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's sure. So the progress isn't quick enough, or the fear is we're never going to close the gap, right? Yeah. So that's what we hear a lot of. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I worry a little bit about, and I think, Joe, this is where sometimes districts and outside experts can get into disagreements is that I worry that the outside experts are not always so in tune with the curriculum that's being delivered. And so there's like a disconnect of, you know, you're not making enough progress. And then oftentimes I've said like, well, what would you suggest? And the suggestions, you know, aren't there. And so sometimes I think there could just be like a disconnect of knowledge of what's going on in the classroom also.
And in
but
fact,
I think, you know, I think progress, you have to monitor progress. If a child's not making progress, then things aren't working. And then the parent has absolutely the right to do one of the things I'm going to be talking about. So when you have an IEP, you can fully accept it, you can fully reject it, or you can partially accept it. And you can do that at any point. So you can fully accept it and then change your mind. Okay. So you are never bound to your, you know, your first choice. You have 30 days to consider the response, and the district can't implement any changes or even start any programming or services without your consent. So I do say to parents, try not to delay your response if you feel like you want services to go quickly. And if you feel like if you can partially accept the IEP quickly, but there are still some things that you want to consider, even do that, because you want, you know, of course you want to get special education services in place as quickly as you can. You can also reject the omission of things. So you might say, you know, I accept this IEP, but I reject the omission of, you know, let's say the district had a proposal of 3 times 30 reading. You can reject the omission of 5 times 30 reading.
Like, and then what happens?
And then you would check the box that says you would like to reconvene the team. And maybe by then the child has started 3 times 30 reading. And then you've met like, you know, 2 weeks after that or 3 weeks after that. And the district says, you know what, look at that. We've been doing 3 times 30 and it's not enough. We agree it should be 5 times 30. Or they say like, look, we've been doing 3 times 30 and this is the progress that they made. This is why we think 3 times 30 is enough. But the reject the omission might be nice, because then you always have a paper trail of the things that you wish you would have had on the IEP that aren't. And you have a starting off point to have a conversation with the district of what you're hoping for. Parents should always put their response in writing and request the meeting to discuss their concerns. Sometimes I think that parents have conversations with teachers like at the pickup, like the end of the day, or like on the phone, and they say like, oh, I wish we would do this instead. And it doesn't sound very formal because you're just having like a quick conversation and nothing gets done. And so then maybe a month later, the parent could say, oh, I thought I asked you to do X, Y, and Z. But the teacher says, oh, that was just a drop off. What are we talking about? And so it's really important, I think, if you have something that you want changed or done differently, that you put it in writing and then request a meeting to discuss it. There are many other dispute resolution formats. So as I like to say, you know, it's really important for school districts to try to solve things at a local level. There are a lot of different ways that you can go about solving disputes. Certainly, Joe has lots of feelings about also other ways to solve disputes, but you always have mediation. The BSCA, the Board of Special Education Appeals, has a lot of different supports. They have facilitators to do mediation. They have facilitated IEPs where someone from the BSCA can come and facilitate your IEP meeting to help things go smoothly. And Joe, do you want to talk about this document?
Which document?
This is the special education. Is special education the right service?
Oh, yes, that's put out by the Massachusetts Department of Education. And it's a SPED advisory 2001-4, and you can get it on the website too, doemass.mass.edu/SPED/advisories. And it's a long thing, but it doesn't just deal with dyslexia. It deals with all different issues. And it has flowcharts of what's required by the parents to do. And it's entitled, Is Special Education the Right Service? A Technical Assistance Guide. And I think, Robin, you put it in your...
It's in, yep, it's in the, it's on the slides right now. And there's also the Parents' Right brochure that you should get when you are requesting evaluations. You should get a copy every year, and it outlines what your rights are as a parent. And it's available in a variety of different languages. So if English is not your first language, it should be, it should be translated for you. You can find them both on the DOE website. And again, it gets mailed to you every single year. Here are some tips. So you have the right to have someone come to the meeting, as I said. You should have them take notes for you in case you are so focused on what's going on, you forget to write things down. You're going to get a summary of the meeting from the school, but again, it will outline the district's proposal. It may not have some of the nuances of the discussion. And so if that's important to you, you can assign, bring someone with you to take notes. You could also hire an advocate.
I want to add one thing there. If you're going to bring your lawyer, you should tell the district ahead of time, because they may want to bring their lawyer then too.
That is true. Yep, districts don't like to have surprise lawyers at meetings. And if you do that, they'll probably reschedule it until their lawyer is available. So if you have a specific date in mind that your lawyer is available, let the district know. You don't need to wait for an annual to reconvene the team. As I said before, you can request a team meeting at any time. If you don't understand something or disagree with something, speak up. It's a document for your child. And so you want to make sure that you're asking questions, that you're getting clarification. Make sure how to share how things are going at home. So for example, if a child is getting 3 times 30 reading, so 3 times 30 minutes a week reading, but you're providing 2 hours of Orton Gillingham services a week at home, and the child's making progress, that has to be factored in, right? Because they're really getting, what is that, 3.5 hours of reading. And so, the district needs to know those things so they can make adjustments. And if there's supports and techniques that are helping at school and the child needs to be using them at home, so if there's like assistive technology that the child accesses at school, the parents should know about that so they can help the child implement that at home. Lots of other legal details. Read your parent right brochure, as we were talking about. And then I guess my final tip is that parents and student services professionals, we're in like a 19-year relationship with you. We have some students that become eligible at age 3 and they stay with us until they're 22. And so we're playing the long game. Like we're about building relationships, and that is so important because we're going to be with you throughout the entire school experience. And, it's really important to get along well. And that doesn't mean that you can't have conflict, because of course, within any relationship of 19 years, there's going to be conflict, but there should be good communication, and people should assume good intentions on both sides, right? Districts should assume good intentions from the parents you're advocating for your child, and districts, parents assume good intentions for the district. We're trying our best to make sure that your child has success in school as well. And I think that is it. Dina, Joe, anything you want to add?
No, I don't think so. I think Robin covered it very well. We get involved only in certain very small percentage of the cases where there's really a disagreement as to eligibility or as to the IEP that's being presented, and the district won't compromise, or, then we have to go to the BSEA or other mediation techniques. Anything on your mind, Dina?
No, I wanted to say thank you to both of you. This was extremely helpful and informative. And I really appreciated getting that balance of, you both are sort of in a way on opposite sides of the table. And I really appreciated sort of getting both perspectives. And I just want to reiterate something you said, Robin, at the end, which I think is so important, which is the relationship piece. Yeah. The people sitting, just from my own experience, I was a special ed teacher for a long time, and now I help parents. And, it's as a parent, there's so much emotion, and the people that you're speaking to, they want what's best for your child too. I really believe that. And I do think that creativity and really trying to build a team and trying to work with the school can have such a positive outcome for your child. So, and asking for help, advocates, and working with advocates who know how to form a team. That's really important. And ultimately, I feel like that's what gets the needs of your child met.
Yep.
So thank you so much to both of you. And thank you for all the attendees tonight. And if you have any questions, please email us. And we will have some exciting other webinars coming up. So thank you so much, everyone. And good night.